Hey survivors, tonight we're taking you somewhere truly terrifying. Not the wilderness, not a zombie apocalypse, but something arguably worse. The open ocean. Miles and miles of water in every direction, no land in sight, and nothing but a life raft between you and the depths below. The ocean covers more than 70% of our planet, and most of it is completely empty of human life. If you end up lost at sea, the odds are stacked against you in ways that make other survival scenarios look easy. No fresh water, no food, no shelter from the sun. Just you, the waves, and time running out. Before we begin this journey into isolation, hit that like button if you're ready to face your deepest fears, and drop a comment telling me, have you ever been out on open water? How did it make you feel? I'm curious to hear your experiences. Now get comfortable in your bed, close your eyes if you'd like, and let's drift together into the kind of solitude that changes people forever. Day 1. Into the abyss. You wake up to motion, not the gentle rocking of a boat at dock, but violent, irregular lurching that immediately triggers nausea. Your eyes snap open to blinding sunlight reflecting off water. So much water, water in every direction, extending to a horizon that seems impossibly far away. You're in a life raft. Orange inflatable walls surround you, rising about 2 feet above the waterline. The raft is maybe 8 feet in diameter, circular with a fabric canopy that provides some shade but not much. The floor beneath you is soft rubber that moves with every wave, making it feel like you're lying on a waterbed that is trying to throw you off. For a moment, your brain refuses to process this reality. This must be a dream, a prank, some kind of elaborate mistake. But the sun is real. You can feel it burning your exposed skin. The salt spray is real. You can taste it on your lips. The nausea is real. Your stomach is already churning from the constant motion. How did you get here? The memories are fragmented, dreamlike. A charter fishing boat, you and 3 friends celebrating someone's birthday, drinking, laughing, taking pictures. Then rough weather moving in faster than predicted, the captain trying to make it back to shore, waves getting bigger, more violent, something breaking. Was it the engine? The radio? Both? Then the moment that changed everything, a rogue wave, massive and impossible, rising up like a green wall and smashing down on the boat with the force of a falling building. The world turning into chaos, water, screaming, the boat capsizing, being thrown into the ocean, grabbing for something, anything. Finding the life raft canister, pulling the inflation cord, the raft expanding with a hiss of compressed gas. And then nothing. A gap in memory that could be minutes or hours, and now you're here, alone, floating on an ocean that extends in every direction, without any sign of land, boats, or other survivors. You check yourself for injuries, bruises everywhere, a gash on your forearm that stopped bleeding but needs attention, and throbbing pain in your ribs that might be broken or just badly bruised. You're wearing shorts, a t-shirt, and sneakers, casual fishing trip clothes that provide almost no protection from sun or cold. Your pockets yield a depressing inventory. A waterlogged phone that won't turn on, a wallet with soggy cash and useless credit cards, and a house key. No knife, no fishing gear, no emergency supplies, nothing useful. You search the life raft desperately, hoping for emergency equipment. Most survival rafts come with basic supplies, water, food rations, flares, fishing gear, but this raft is bare except for a single plastic paddle, a small manual bilge pump, and a pathetic emergency kit in a waterproof pouch containing Band-Aids, a small tube of antibiotic ointment, and a single emergency blanket. No water, no food, no signaling devices, no way to call for help. You try to assess your situation rationally, but panic is rising in your chest like a physical force. You're floating somewhere in the ocean. You don't even know which ocean, though you think it was somewhere off the coast. The boat went down in a storm that probably knocked out any distress signals. Nobody knows exactly where you are, and even if they did, finding a single person in a small raft on the open ocean is like finding a needle in a haystack the size of a continent. The sun is beating down with tropical intensity. You're already thirsty, your mouth dry from salt water and fear. The constant motion of the raft is making you increasingly nauseous. Every wave that passes lifts the raft up and drops it down, an endless roller coaster that never stops. You scan the horizon desperately for any sign of the boat, your friends, rescue vessels. Nothing. Just water and sky meeting at a line so sharp and distant it looks like the edge of the world. No boats, no planes, no land, nothing but you and the ocean, and the growing realization that you might die out here. The worst part is the silence. Not complete silence. The ocean is actually quite loud, with waves slapping against the raft and water rushing past. But the absence of human sounds, of engines or voices or any indication that other people exist anywhere in the universe, it's a loneliness more profound than anything you've experienced. A solitude that makes you question whether the rest of the world is even real anymore. You think about your friends who were on the boat. Are they alive? Did they make it to other rafts? Are they floating somewhere nearby, just beyond the horizon? Or did they drown in that chaos, pulled down by the weight of the ocean while you somehow survived? Survivor's guilt mixes with fear, creating a toxic cocktail of emotions that threatens to overwhelm your ability to think rationally. But some survival instinct kicks in, reminding you that emotions are a luxury you can't afford right now. You need to focus on the immediate problems: sun exposure, dehydration, and the fact that you're utterly lost on an ocean that could easily kill you in a dozen different ways. You use the emergency blanket from the first aid kit to create additional shade, rigging it with a paddle and some elastic cords you find attached to the raft. It's not much, but it provides a slightly larger shaded area that might help prevent sunstroke. You apply antibiotic ointment to the gash on your arm and wrap it with strips torn from the bottom of your t-shirt. It's not ideal, but infection in your current situation could be fatal, so you do what you can. Then you settle in to wait. For what, you're not sure. Rescue? Death? Something to change in this endless expanse of water? The first day passes in a blur of nausea, thirst, and slowly dawning horror at your situation. The sun moves across the sky with agonizing slowness. You try to conserve energy, staying still in the shade, but the raft won't let you rest. It's constantly moving, constantly reminding you that you're floating on water that's thousands of feet deep, held up by nothing but rubber and air. As the sun begins to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that would be beautiful if you weren't terrified, you realize that you've survived day one. But the ocean is vast, rescue might never come, and you have no water, no food, and no idea how to survive what comes next. Night falls quickly on the ocean, and with it comes a cold that seems impossible after the burning heat of the day. You huddle under the emergency blanket, shivering, listening to waves and wondering if you'll see another sunrise. This is only the beginning, and already the ocean is winning. The thirst that kills. Day 2 begins with a thirst so intense it's all you can think about. Your tongue is swollen, your lips are cracked and bleeding, and your throat feels like it's been coated with sandpaper. You haven't had anything to drink in more than 24 hours, and you lost fluids yesterday through sweating in the tropical heat and vomiting from seasickness. The cruelest irony of being lost at sea is that you're surrounded by water, billions of gallons of it, and you can't drink a single drop. Seawater contains about 3.5% salt,
roughly 4 times the concentration your body can safely process. Drinking it doesn't quench thirst, it makes dehydration worse, as your kidneys try to flush out the excess salt using more water than you consumed. But knowing that intellectually doesn't stop the temptation. You stare at the water lapping against the sides of your raft, crystal clear and inviting, and your body screams at you to drink it. Just a little bit, just enough to wet your mouth. What harm could it do? You know the harm it could do. You've read the stories of sailors who've drank seawater in desperation, who've descended into madness as the salt poisoned their systems, who died surrounded by water with their insides desiccated. But reading about it and experiencing the reality of that temptation are very different things. The sun rises higher, and the heat becomes oppressive. You're sweating again, losing more precious fluids, watching your chances of survival tick downward with each passing hour. The human body can survive about 3 days without water. In the tropical heat on a raft that provides minimal shade, you have maybe 2 days before dehydration kills you or makes you so irrational that you make fatal mistakes.
You try to remember everything you've ever learned about survival at sea. Collect rainwater, but there are no clouds in the perfect blue sky. Use the emergency blanket to create a solar still, but you don't have the materials or knowledge to build one that actually works. Catch fish and drink their body fluids, but you have no fishing equipment, and even if you did, you're not sure you could stomach raw fish in your current condition. Your body is already showing signs of dehydration. Headache pounding behind your eyes, dizziness when you try to move, dark urine that comes infrequently and burns. Your skin has lost its elasticity. When you pinch it, it stays tinted for several seconds before slowly settling back. You try to produce saliva by thinking about food and drink, but your mouth is too dry. You try to conserve energy by staying still, but the constant motion of the raft makes rest impossible. You try to stay calm, knowing that panic uses energy and increases fluid loss through rapid breathing, but fear is a constant companion that won't be dismissed. Around midday, when the sun is directly overhead and the heat is unbearable, you think you see something. A ship on the horizon? No, just a cloud formation that your desperate brain interpreted as salvation. This happens several more times throughout the day. Your mind creating rescue scenarios out of nothing, offering false hope that's somehow worse than honest despair. You've entered the stage of dehydration where cognitive function begins to decline. Your thoughts are becoming sluggish, circular, harder to control. You find yourself staring at the water for minutes at a time, losing track of what you were thinking about, struggling to maintain the mental discipline that is necessary for survival. The temptation to drink seawater grows stronger as the day progresses. You dip your hand in the water and bring it to your lips just to feel the moisture, telling yourself you won't actually drink it. The water is cool, inviting, and it takes every ounce of willpower to dump it back over the side instead of swallowing. You try to distract yourself by creating a plan, something to focus on besides thirst. You need to signal for rescue, but how? You have no flares, no signal mirror, no radio. The emergency blanket is reflective, so you could use it to create reflected sunlight signals, but you'd have to see a plane or ship first, and the horizon remains stubbornly empty. You could try to paddle in a direction, but which direction? You don't know where you are, which way is land, or how far you'd have to go. The ocean all looks the same in every direction, endless blue water extending to an endless blue sky. Without navigation equipment or even a basic understanding of celestial navigation, any direction you choose would be pure guesswork. As the sun begins its descent toward the horizon, you realize with crushing despair that you've survived day 2, but you're weaker, more dehydrated, and closer to the point where survival becomes impossible. You haven't seen a single ship, plane, or sign of human civilization. For all you know, you could be hundreds of miles from any shipping lane, any flight path, any chance of being spotted. The ocean seems bigger now than it did yesterday, and you seem smaller, a tiny speck of human life in an incomprehensibly vast expanse of water that doesn't care whether you live or die. Night comes again, bringing cold that makes you shiver despite being in a tropical region.
Dehydration affects your body's ability to regulate temperature, making you feel colder than you should. You huddle under the emergency blanket, teeth chattering, and try to think about anything besides water. But water is all you can think about. Water fountains, bottles of water, rain, rivers, showers. Your body is starting to obsess over the one thing it needs to survive, the one thing you don't have and can't create. You drift in and out of sleep, tormented by dreams of drinking from cool streams, only to wake up with your mouth still desperately dry. At some point during the night, you're not even sure if you're awake or dreaming anymore. The line between consciousness and delirium is starting to blur. Day 3 will be critical. If you don't find water somehow, if it doesn't rain, if rescue doesn't arrive, you'll start the rapid decline into severe dehydration that ends in organ failure, unconsciousness, and death. The ocean doesn't care. It never did. And you're starting to understand just how insignificant you are compared to its vastness. Storm and salvation. Day 3 dawns gray instead of blue. The sky, which had been clear for 2 days, is now filling with clouds, massive cumulus formations that tower into the upper atmosphere like mountains made of vapor. The wind is picked up and the waves are getting larger, lifting your raft higher and dropping it harder.
A storm is coming. Your first reaction is fear. Storms at sea are dangerous, capable of capsizing small craft, filling rafts with water, or simply overwhelming someone in your weakened condition. But then, you remember what storms bring. Rain. Fresh water. The thing you need more than anything else to survive. You scramble to prepare, fighting through the fog of dehydration and exhaustion. You bail out the small amount of seawater that's sloshed into the raft. You position the emergency blanket to create a catchment area, using the paddle to create a low point where water will collect. You remove your shirt and spread it out to absorb rain that you can hopefully wring into your mouth. The storm approaches with intimidating speed. The clouds darken from white to gray to almost black. The wind increases from a breeze to a roar. The waves grow from swells to genuine hills of water that make your raft feel like a toy. Lightning begins to flash in the distance, accompanied seconds later by thunder that you feel in your chest. You're suddenly aware of how vulnerable you are, a small rubber raft on open water with nowhere to hide, no protection, nothing but fabric and air between you and an ocean that's starting to look angry. The first drops of rain hit your face like small miracles. You open your mouth to the sky, trying to catch drops on your swollen tongue. The rain increases quickly from scattered drops to a steady pour to a torrential downpour that soaks you completely in seconds. It's the most beautiful thing you've ever experienced. You're drinking, gulping, catching water in your cupped hands and bringing it to your mouth again and again. It tastes clean, fresh, infinitely precious. Your body absorbs it desperately, your cells rehydrating, your brain starting to clear from the fog of dehydration. You fill your emergency blanket catchment, watching precious water collect in the low point. You soak your shirt completely, then wring it out into your mouth over and over, not caring about the awkward angle or the water that drips past your lips. You're getting water, actual, drinkable water, and nothing else matters. But the storm isn't finished with you. The wind becomes violent, screaming across the water and threatening to tear your makeshift rain collection system apart. The waves grow to terrifying heights, 10 feet, 15 feet, massive walls of water that lift your raft to their peaks and then drop you into troughs where you can't see anything but water on all sides. You're holding on now, gripping the safety lines that run around the interior of the raft, trying not to be thrown out as the ocean tosses you around like a toy. Water is pouring into the raft, not just rain, but seawater splashing over the sides with each wave. You're being drenched, battered, terrified that the raft will flip or that a wave will simply wash you away.
The bilge pump you found becomes critical. You're pumping frantically between waves, trying to keep the raft from being swamped, from collecting so much water that it loses buoyancy and drags you down. Your arms burn with exhaustion, but stopping means sinking, so you keep pumping. Lightning strikes somewhere close. You see the flash and hear the thunder simultaneously, a crack so loud it feels like the sky is splitting open. You're suddenly aware that you could be struck, that a life raft on open water might actually attract lightning, that you could survive thirst only to be killed by electricity. The storm rages for hours that feel like days. You alternate between drinking rain, pumping seawater, and simply holding on for dear life as the ocean shows you exactly how small and powerless you are. Several times you're certain the raft is going to flip. Several times waves break over you completely, submerging you in green water before the raft pops back up like a cork. But somehow, impossibly, you survive. The storm begins to weaken as suddenly as it arrived. The rain tapers off from torrential to heavy to light to nothing. The wind decreases. The waves, though still large, become less violent. The clouds begin to break apart, revealing patches of blue sky and, eventually, the sun, now lower in the sky and less oppressive than before. You're exhausted, bruised, and traumatized, but you're alive and you have water. You assess your situation with a clearer mind than you had since this ordeal began. Your emergency blanket catchment contains maybe a liter of fresh water. Your shirt holds another half-liter that you can wring out. It's not much, not nearly enough for long-term survival, but it's enough for a few more days if you're careful.
You drink slowly now, letting your body absorb the water gradually rather than overwhelming your system. You've heard about refeeding syndrome, how people who've been severely dehydrated can die if they rehydrate too quickly. You're not sure if that applies to water or just food, but you decide caution is better than risk. The ocean around you looks different after the storm. The water is darker, choppier, and there's debris floating nearby, pieces of wood, what might be part of a boat, things that were churned up from the depths or washed in from elsewhere. You see a plastic bottle bobbing past, tantalizingly close but just out of reach. Part of you wants to dive in after it, to have a container for storing water, but the rational part knows that leaving the raft would be suicide. As evening approaches, you take stock of your situation. You have water, enough for maybe 3 or 4 more days if you ration carefully. You have shelter, the raft itself, and your makeshift sunshade. What you don't have is food, and you're starting to feel the effects of not eating. Your stomach is cramping, your body is burning through its reserves, and you know that starvation is the next challenge you'll face. But at least you're not dying of thirst anymore. The storm, which could have killed you, instead saved you. The ocean gave you something it rarely gives to those lost on its surface, a second chance. You watch the sunset, more grateful than you've ever been for something as simple as water. You're still lost, still alone, still facing death in a dozen different ways, but today you survived. And that's enough. For now. Hunger and hallucinations. Day 5 begins with your stomach eating itself from the inside. You haven't had food in almost 4 days, and your body is starting to cannibalize its own resources, burning fat, then muscle, extracting every possible calorie to keep your vital organs functioning. The water from the storm is nearly gone. You've been rationing it carefully, allowing yourself small sips throughout each day, but the combination of tropical heat and the simple metabolic needs of staying alive means you're still losing fluids faster than you can replace them. Without another storm or some miraculous source of fresh water, you'll be back in critical dehydration within a day or 2. But right now, hunger is the dominant sensation. Not the familiar hunger of missing a meal or even skipping food for a day, but a deep, gnawing emptiness that makes you weak and dizzy. Your body is screaming for calories, for protein, for anything that can be converted to energy. The ocean is full of food. Fish swimming beneath you, seabirds occasionally flying overhead,
even the raft itself probably attracting some marine life to the small ecosystem it creates by providing shade and shelter. But catching any of that food without equipment seems impossible. You try to remember everything you've ever learned about survival fishing. Improvised hooks from bent metal, but you don't have any metal except your house key, which isn't shaped right. Fishing line from cloth fibers, theoretically possible, but your clothes are synthetic and don't have natural fibers that can be twisted into strong line. Using your hands to catch fish, laughably ineffective for someone without experience or the lightning reflexes required. You stare into the water beside your raft, watching small fish dart in the shadows beneath you. They're right there, inches away, completely unreachable. You try to grab one, plunging your hand into the water with desperate speed, but they're always faster, always just out of reach. Around midday, you see your first shark. It's small, maybe 4 feet long, and it circles your raft at a distance with the lazy confidence of an apex predator that has no natural enemies. Your first reaction is terror. Every movie you ever seen has taught you that sharks are dangerous, that they attack people, that being in the water with one is certain death. But then you realize you're not in the water, you're in a raft, and the shark shows no interest in you. It's curious about this strange orange object floating on the surface, but after a few minutes of circling, it loses interest and swims away into the blue depths. Still, its presence is a reminder that you're not alone out here. The ocean is full of life, most of it completely indifferent to your survival, but some of it potentially dangerous. You think about all the things living beneath you: sharks, jellyfish, barracuda, eels, creatures you can't even name. An entire ecosystem going about its business while you float on the surface, a temporary visitor in their world.
The sun beats down relentlessly, and you're starting to experience symptoms that go beyond simple hunger and thirst. Your vision is playing tricks on you. Shadows moving in your peripheral vision that disappear when you look directly at them. Sounds that might be voices calling your name, but when you listen carefully, they're just wind and waves. Hallucinations. Your brain, stressed by dehydration, starvation, sun exposure, and isolation, is starting to malfunction. You see a ship on the horizon and shout for help, waving your arms frantically, before realizing it's just a cloud formation. You hear a helicopter and scan the sky desperately, only to identify the sound as wind whistling through a small tear in your raft's canopy. You smell food cooking, bacon, coffee, toast, so real you can almost taste it, and have to remind yourself that you're alone on the ocean with nothing to cook, even if you had ingredients. The psychological effects of isolation are becoming as dangerous as the physical effects of deprivation. You find yourself talking out loud, having conversations with people who aren't there, asking questions and answering them in different voices. Part of you knows this is concerning, that you're losing your grip on reality, but another part doesn't care, is grateful for any kind of company, even if it's imaginary. You try to maintain routines to keep your mind organized. You watch the sun's progress across the sky and mark the passage of time. You check your wounds, which are healing slowly in the harsh environment. You organize your minimal supplies, the nearly empty water container, the first aid kit, the paddle, the emergency blanket. You tell yourself stories about what you'll do when you're rescued, the food you'll eat, the people you'll hug, the simple pleasures of solid ground and fresh water. But maintaining sanity requires energy, and you're running out of energy. Each day you're weaker, more confused, less capable of the rational thought that keeps you from making fatal mistakes. A seabird lands on the edge of your raft, a gull or tern, you're not sure which. It regards you with one eye, perfectly calm, completely unafraid. You could grab it, you think, kill it and eat it raw. Seabirds are meat, calories, nutrition your body desperately needs. You move slowly, carefully, reaching out with deliberate patience. The bird watches you with seeming indifference.
Your hand gets closer, closer, almost close enough. The bird takes flight at the last second, launching itself into the air with a few powerful wing beats. You're left with empty hands and a stomach that cramps even harder at the thought of the missed meal. You cry then, not from physical pain, but from frustration, despair, and the crushing weight of understanding just how helpless you are. You're starving, surrounded by food you can't catch. You're dying of thirst, surrounded by water you can't drink. You're being slowly killed by sun you can't escape. The ocean doesn't care about your suffering. It continues its endless motion, waves rising and falling with the same rhythm they've maintained for millions of years before you existed and will maintain for millions of years after you're gone. As evening approaches and your 5th day lost at sea comes to an end, you realize that you're entering the critical phase of your ordeal. The human body can survive roughly 3 weeks without food, but that's under ideal conditions, with plenty of water and minimal stress. In your situation, dehydrated, sun-damaged, sleep-deprived, and psychologically traumatized, you probably have a week at most before you're too weak to function. 1 week to be found, or to find land, or to die trying. The sunset is beautiful again, painting the sky in impossible colors. But beauty doesn't fill empty stomachs or parched throats. And as darkness falls once more, you wonder how many more sunsets you'll see before the ocean finally claims you. The visitor. Day 7 dawns with you barely conscious, drifting in and out of awareness as your body struggles to maintain basic functions despite severe depletion of resources. You're in bad shape, skin burned and blistered from sun exposure, lips cracked and bleeding, eyes sunken, body trembling with weakness. You've given up many of your routines. You're too weak to maintain them, too confused to remember why they mattered. Time has become fluid, hours blending together into a continuous present where nothing changes except the position of the sun and the patterns of waves. But then something does change. You hear a splash, different from the usual sounds of waves against your raft, then another, then a sound that makes your heart race despite your weakness, a breath, but not human, an exhalation that's visible as mist in the morning air.
You force yourself to focus, to look beyond the edge of your raft and see them. Dolphins. 3 of them, swimming alongside your raft with effortless grace, occasionally breaking the surface to breathe, their sleek bodies cutting through the water like living torpedoes. For a moment, you think this is another hallucination. Your brain has been producing increasingly vivid false perceptions, showing you ships and planes and rescue that aren't there. But these dolphins are different. When they surface, you hear the distinct sound of their blowholes. When they dive, you see the ripples they create. When one brushes against your raft, you feel the subtle bump. They're real. The dolphins circle your raft several times, seemingly curious about this strange floating object and its weak human occupant. One of them, the largest, surfaces right beside you, so close you could reach out and touch it. It regards you with one eye, and you have this strange sensation that it's assessing you, judging your condition, making some kind of decision. You've heard stories about dolphins helping humans, pushing drowning swimmers to shore, protecting people from sharks, showing boats the way to land. You've always dismissed these as exaggerations, anthropomorphic projections of human values onto animals that are simply following their own instincts and behaviors. But now, weak and desperate and possibly hallucinating, you want to believe the stories. You want these dolphins to save you, to guide you to land, to perform some kind of miracle that will end your ordeal. The dolphins continue circling for perhaps 10 minutes. Then, as suddenly as they appeared, they swim away. Not randomly, but in a specific direction, moving with purpose toward what might be the northeast. One of them surfaces a final time about 50 yards away, as if looking back to see if you're following. You grab your paddle with trembling hands. It takes 3 attempts to get a proper grip. Your hands are swollen and your fingers don't respond to commands properly anymore, but you manage and you start paddling in the direction the dolphins went. It's foolish, you know. You have no reason to believe they were leading you anywhere. They're animals following their own agenda, and assigning meaning to their behavior is probably just your brain creating patterns where none exist. You're using precious energy to paddle in a direction that's likely as random as any other. But you have nothing else. No plan, no hope, no better idea. And the act of paddling, of doing something instead of just floating and waiting to die, feels like reclaiming some tiny measure of control. You paddled weakly, taking breaks every few minutes to rest. The sun climbs higher and the heat becomes oppressive. You're sweating again despite having almost no fluids to spare. Your arms burn with exhaustion that goes beyond muscle fatigue. This is the exhaustion of a body that has consumed its own reserves and is now running on willpower alone. After what might be an hour, or might be 3, your sense of time is completely unreliable now. You see something on the horizon. At first, you dismiss it as another hallucination, another cruel trick your mind is playing. But as you continue paddling, it persists. It doesn't vanish when you blink or look away. It grows larger, more defined, more real. Land. It's not much, a small island, maybe a mile or 2 across, covered in vegetation with what looks like a rocky beach. It could be uninhabited. It could have no fresh water. It could be just as deadly as the open ocean, but in different ways. But it's solid ground. It's something other than endless water. And right now, that's everything. You paddle with renewed energy, born of hope, though your body protests every movement. The island seems to get closer with agonizing slowness. Distance over water is deceptive, and what looks close can be miles away. But it is getting closer. You're making progress. Hours pass. The sun moves across the sky. Your arms feel like they're going to fall off. You're hallucinating again, seeing your family on the beach waving at you, seeing rescue boats that aren't there, hearing voices calling your name. But the island remains real, solid, undeniably present. As the sun begins to set on your 7th day lost at sea, your raft finally scrapes against rocks. You've made landfall. You're shaking, crying, barely able to believe it's real. You try to stand and immediately fall, your legs unable to support your weight after days of not using them. You crawl instead, dragging yourself onto the rocky beach, getting scraped and bruised in the process, but not caring. You are on land,
solid, unmoving land. You collapse on the rocks and press your face against them, feeling their solidity, their realness, their beautiful immobility.
You've survived the ocean. 7 days lost at sea, and somehow, impossibly, you made it to land. But survival at sea has simply become survival on a deserted island. Your ordeal isn't over. It's just changed environments. You still have no food, almost no water, no way to signal for rescue, and a body that's been pushed to the absolute limits of endurance. Still, as darkness falls and you lie on the beach, too exhausted to move, you feel something you haven't felt in days. Hope. Fragile, tentative hope that maybe, just maybe, you'll actually survive this. The ocean continues its eternal rhythm behind you, waves crashing against rocks with the same indifference they've always shown. But you're not on the ocean anymore. You're alive, and that's enough for tonight. Island of Desperation. Day 8 begins with you waking on the beach, every muscle screaming, skin burning, and throat so dry you can barely swallow. The euphoria of reaching land has faded, replaced by the harsh reality that you've simply traded one deadly situation for another. You force yourself to sit up, taking stock of your new environment. The island is small. You can see most of it from where you're lying. Rocky beaches give way to dense vegetation inland. No signs of human habitation. No buildings, no boats, no trash. Nothing to suggest anyone has ever been here. No smoke signals from a fire. No airplanes overhead. Just you, the island, and the ocean stretching to every horizon. First priority, water. You can survive longer without food, but dehydration will kill you within days, and you're already severely dehydrated from your time at sea. You drag yourself up the beach toward the vegetation, hoping to find a stream, a spring, any source of fresh water. The interior of the island is surprisingly dense. Palm trees, thick undergrowth, vines, and vegetation you can't identify. You push through, leaving the beach behind, searching desperately for water. You find moisture, condensation on leaves, damp soil, but nothing you can actually drink. Then you hear it, a faint trickling sound. You follow the sound with increasing desperation, pushing through thorny bushes that tear your already damaged skin until you find it. A tiny spring feeding a small pool no bigger than a bathtub. The water is cloudy, surrounded by algae, probably full of microorganisms that will make you seriously ill. But you need water now, and you'll deal with the consequences of contaminated water later, if there is a later. You drink until your stomach is uncomfortably full, then force yourself to stop and assess the situation more rationally. This spring will be your lifeline. You need to remember exactly where it is, mark the path somehow, make sure you can find it again. You break branches and arrange stones to create markers that will guide you back to the beach. Next priority, shelter and fire. The sun is climbing higher, and you know from your time on the raft that sun exposure without protection is deadly. You need shade, and ideally, you need fire. For warmth at night, for purifying water, for cooking if you manage to find food, and for signaling if a plane or boat passes by. You explore the island methodically, despite your weakness. It takes most of the day, but you map out the basic geography in your mind. The island is roughly oval-shaped, maybe 2 miles long and a mile wide. Rocky beaches on all sides. Dense vegetation in the interior. No signs of previous human habitation. No animals larger than birds and small lizards.
No obvious sources of food beyond possible fish in the surrounding ocean. You find a suitable spot for shelter, a rocky overhang near the beach that provides natural protection from sun and rain. You gather palm fronds and large leaves to create additional shade and windbreak. It's crude work, and you're so weak that gathering even basic materials exhausts you. But by evening, you have something that resembles shelter. Fire is the next challenge. You have no matches, no lighter, no ferro rod. You need to create fire through friction, bow drill, hand drill, or fire plow. Techniques you've read about but never actually practiced. You gather materials, a flat baseboard of soft wood, a spindle of harder wood, dried grass, and plant fibers for tinder. The first attempts are disasters. Your hands are too weak, your technique is wrong, your materials aren't right. Hours pass with nothing to show for them, except blisters on top of blisters and mounting frustration. The sun sets, and you're left in darkness without fire, shivering as the temperature drops.
You spend your first night on the island much like you spent nights on the raft. Cold, uncomfortable, and afraid. But at least the ground doesn't move. At least you're not surrounded by thousands of feet of water. Days 9 through 15 blur together in a routine of desperate survival. Each day follows a similar pattern. Wake up exhausted, drink from the spring, attempt to find food, work on making fire, improve your shelter, and collapse at nightfall. The water from the spring makes you sick, as you knew it would. You spend 2 days with severe diarrhea and cramping, losing what little fluids you're taking in. But your body eventually adapts or fights off whatever bacteria were in the water, and the sickness passes. You're weaker for it, but alive. Food becomes your obsession. You try to catch fish with your hands. Impossible. You try to make a spear from a sharpened stick. You manage to stab one fish, but it wriggles free before you can get it to shore. You search for edible plants, but without knowledge of what's safe, you're afraid to eat anything beyond obvious coconuts, but you find in limited quantities. The coconuts become your primary sustenance. You learn to open them by smashing them against rocks, drinking the sweet water inside, and eating the white meat. It's not enough calories for long-term survival, but it keeps you from complete starvation. On day 12, you finally create fire. After days of failed attempts, of blistered hands and sore muscles and countless failures, you manage to create enough friction with a bow drill to produce an ember. You carefully transfer it to your tinder bundle, blow gently, and watch with almost religious awe as flames appear. You cry at the small victory. Fire means cooked food, purified water, warmth, and smoke signals for rescue. It means hope. You maintain the fire obsessively, never letting it go out completely, always keeping embers alive so you don't have to repeat the agonizing process of starting from scratch. You burn green leaves and branches to create smoke during the day, hoping someone will see it. You keep the fire burning bright at night, a beacon in the darkness. But no one comes. Days pass with no sign of ships, planes, or any indication that humans exist anywhere but on this small island. You begin to wonder if you're in some remote part of the ocean where shipping lanes and flight paths don't pass. You begin to wonder if anyone is even searching for you anymore, or if you've been declared dead, your case closed, your family mourning while you're actually alive but unreachable. The psychological toll of isolation becomes as dangerous as the physical challenges. You talk to yourself constantly, having long conversations with imaginary companions, creating elaborate fantasies about rescue that become increasingly divorced from reality. You name the seabirds that visit your beach. You draw faces on coconuts and prop them up around your fire like companions. You know these signs are deteriorating mental health, but knowing doesn't stop them.
The human brain isn't designed for complete isolation. We're social creatures, and without social interaction, our minds begin to malfunction in strange ways. Your body is changing too. You've lost significant weight, probably 30 or 40 pounds from your already average frame. Your ribs are visible. Your face is gaunt. Your muscles have atrophied from lack of proper nutrition and the simple metabolic reality that your body is consuming itself to stay alive. Your skin is deeply tanned and damaged from constant sun exposure. Your hair has grown wild and matted. Your beard is unruly. If you saw yourself in a mirror, you wouldn't recognize the person staring back. But you're surviving. Each day you wake up, find water, search for food, maintain your fire, and refuse to give up. You're not thriving, not living well, but you're alive. And some days, that feels like enough. The storm returns. Day 23 brings clouds on the horizon for the first time since you reached the island. You watch them approach with mixed emotions. Storms mean rain and fresh water, which you desperately need, since the spring produces barely enough to sustain you. But storms also mean danger. High winds, heavy rain, flooding, and the possibility that your primitive shelter won't hold up. You prepare as best as you can. You gather extra firewood and store it in the driest spot under your shelter's overhang. You collect containers, hollowed out coconut shells, large leaves folded into cups to catch rainwater. You reinforce your shelter with additional branches and fronds. You move your most critical possessions, your bow drill fire starting kit, wrapped in layers of leaves to keep dry, to the highest point of your camp.
The storm arrives in the afternoon with tropical intensity. Wind that bends palm trees nearly horizontal. Rain that falls in sheets so thick you can barely see 10 feet. Thunder and lightning that make the air itself seem alive with violence. Your shelter holds, barely. Water pours through gaps in your roof, soaking everything despite your preparations. The wind tears away some of your palm frond covering, exposing you to the elements. Your fire, despite your best efforts to protect it, drowns in the deluge, and you watch years of evolutionary advantage disappear as the last embers die. But you're collecting water. Coconut shells fill with clean rainwater. Large leaves channel runoff into your containers. You drink as much as you can hold, then drink more, rehydrating properly for the first time since reaching the island. Your body absorbs the water gratefully, and you feel your mind clearing, your strength returning slightly. The storm lasts through the night. You huddle under your inadequate shelter, soaked and shivering, listening to the wind howl and trees crack. You wonder if this is how it ends, not with a dramatic moment, but with hypothermia and exhaustion during a storm on an island where no one knows you exist. But morning comes. The storm passes. You're still alive. The island looks different after the storm. Trees are down, vegetation is flattened, and your camp is partially destroyed. But there were also gifts the storm has brought. Fish washed up on the beach, dying in shallow pools where the storm surge deposited them. Seaweed and kelp scattered across the rocks. A large piece of driftwood that could be useful for construction or fuel. You gather the fish quickly before they rot in the sun. Maybe a dozen small fish and one larger one. Enough protein to sustain you for several days if you can cook and preserve them properly. This is more food than you've had since the ordeal began. You spend the morning rebuilding your fire, using the bow drill again, but with better technique born of practice. It takes less time this time, maybe an hour instead of days. When flames appear, you feel a surge of confidence. You're learning, adapting, becoming competent at survival instead of just barely clinging to life. You cook the fish over your fire, and the smell of cooking protein is intoxicating. You eat slowly, savoring every bite, feeling actual food entering your system for the first time in over 3 weeks. It's not enough to reverse the weight loss and muscle atrophy, but it's a start. Over the next few days, you continue improving your situation. You build a better shelter using materials salvaged from storm damage. You create a fish trap using rocks arranged in a tidal pool, catching small fish when the tide comes in. You experiment with eating certain plants, trying tiny amounts and waiting to see if they make you sick. You're still lost, still isolated, still without any realistic prospect of rescue. But you're no longer on the edge of death. You've achieved a precarious stability, enough food, water, and shelter to survive indefinitely, assuming no disasters occur. The question becomes, how long can you maintain this? How long before an injury, illness, or simple accident ends your streak of survival? How long before the psychological toll of isolation breaks you completely? How long before you give up hope and stop fighting? You don't know the answers. You just know that today you survived. And tomorrow, you'll try to survive again. That's all you can do. Rescue. Day 37 begins like any other. Wake up in your improved shelter, check your fire, drink from your collected rainwater, eat a small breakfast of fish and coconut. You've established a routine that keeps you alive and gives structure to days that would otherwise blur into meaningless repetition. You're on the beach working on improving your fish trap when you hear it. An engine. Not the distant rumble that could be waves or imagination, but the distinct mechanical sound of a boat motor. Your heart stops. You've heard this sound in your head so many times, phantom rescue that never materializes, that you're afraid to believe it's real. But the sound gets louder, more distinct, definitely real. You run to your fire and throw on green branches, creating thick white smoke that billows into the clear sky. You run back to the beach, waving your arms frantically, shouting even though they can't possibly hear you yet. And then you see it. A fishing boat, maybe half a mile offshore, moving parallel to the island. They haven't seen you yet. They're just passing by, probably working fishing grounds in this area. You're screaming now, waving both arms, jumping up and down despite your weakened state. The smoke from your fire rises in a clear column against the blue sky. Someone on the boat must see it because the boat turns, angles toward the island, the engine note changing as they increase speed. They're coming. After 37 days of isolation, someone is actually coming. The next hour is a blur of activity and emotion. The fishing boat, a commercial vessel with a crew of 4, approaches as close as they safely can, then sends a small dinghy to shore. The fishermen are shocked by your appearance. Skeletal, sun-damaged, wild-haired, barely recognizable as the person you were before this ordeal began. They give you water, real clean water in a plastic bottle. They give you food, crackers and canned fish, and watch to make sure you don't eat too fast and make yourself sick. They ask questions. Who are you? How long have you been here? What happened? You try to answer, but the words come out jumbled. You've been talking only to yourself for over a month, and actual conversation with real humans feels surreal, like you've forgotten how to do it properly. They radio for help. Within hours, a Coast Guard helicopter arrives, creating winds that flatten vegetation and kick up sand. A rescue swimmer drops down, assesses your condition, and helps you into a harness. You're lifted into the sky, watching your island recede below you, the place that nearly killed you, but also kept you alive long enough for this moment. The helicopter ride to the nearest hospital is disorienting. The noise, the speed, the return to civilization after so long in isolation, it's overwhelming in ways you didn't anticipate. You grip the rescue swimmer's hand like a lifeline, afraid that if you let go, you'll wake up and discover this is another hallucination. But it's real. You're really being rescued. You survived. Recovery and integration. The hospital becomes your world for the next 2 weeks. You're severely malnourished, dehydrated despite drinking from the spring, and suffering from multiple infections, sun damage, and injuries that you'd been ignoring because there was nothing you could do about them. The medical staff are amazed you survived at all. 37 days lost at sea and stranded on a deserted island should have killed you multiple times over. The doctor tells you that another week, maybe 2, and your body would have started shutting down from organ failure caused by prolonged malnutrition. You were rescued just in time. The media wants your story. Miracle survivor found after 37 days lost at sea, the headlines read. Reporters want interviews. Documentary producers want to recreate your ordeal. Everyone wants a piece of the dramatic narrative. But you discover that you don't want to talk about it. Not yet. The experience is too raw, too personal, too complex to reduce to sound bites and dramatic retellings. How do you explain what it's like to be truly alone for over a month? How do you convey the terror, the desperation, the moments when you wanted to give up? Your family visits, crying and hugging you and thanking God or fate or luck that you're alive. Your friends come, shocked by your appearance and the changes they see not just in your body, but in your eyes, your manner, the way you relate to the world. You learn that they'd searched for you extensively after the boat sank. Coast Guard, volunteer vessels, aerial searches covering hundreds of square miles of ocean. They'd found debris from the boat, but no survivors. After 2 weeks, you were declared lost at sea, presumed dead. Your memorial service had been 3 weeks ago. People had mourned you, said goodbye, started the process of moving on. And now here you are, alive, forcing everyone to readjust their reality and process complicated emotions about your return. You also learned that you weren't the only survivor. One of your friends from the boat was found after 4 days, clinging to debris, barely alive but rescued. The other 2 didn't make it. Their bodies were never recovered, claimed by the ocean that you barely escaped. This knowledge sits heavy in your chest. Why did you survive when they didn't? You made it to a life raft by chance, found an island by luck, got rescued by the random presence of a fishing boat in the right place at the right time. None of it was skill or deserving. It was just probability. Chaos. Meaningless chance. Physical recovery takes months. You need to regain the weight you lost, rebuild muscle that atrophied, heal skin damaged by sun and salt, but the physical healing is easier than the psychological adjustment.
You have nightmares about drowning, about being stuck on the raft forever, about dying alone on the island. You have anxiety attacks in crowded places, your brain unable to process the presence of so many people after so much isolation. You hoard food and water, keeping emergency supplies in every room, despite living in a place where those things are abundantly available. The ocean haunts you. You can't look at it without feeling a complex mixture of terror, respect, and strange longing. It tried to kill you, should have killed you, but somehow you made it through. And now you're forever changed by that experience. You start therapy, talking through the trauma with a professional who specializes in survival situations and PTSD. It helps, slowly. You begin to process what happened, to integrate the experience into your sense of self instead of trying to pretend it didn't happen. You also start learning about proper ocean safety, survival techniques, emergency procedures. If you're ever in that situation again, and you pray you never are, you want to be better prepared. You take courses in marine survival, first aid, navigation. You learn to sail, to read weather patterns, to understand the ocean in ways you didn't before. You become an advocate for water safety, speaking to groups about the importance of proper equipment, emergency beacons, life rafts stocked with supplies. If your story can prevent someone else from experiencing what you went through, then maybe the suffering wasn't entirely pointless. The return. 6 months after your rescue, you do something that everyone thinks is crazy. You go back to the ocean. Not to the same area where you were lost, you're not that foolish. But you need to face the ocean again to prove to yourself that the ocean doesn't own you, that you can be near it without falling apart. You join a sailing group, start going on day trips in safe waters close to shore. The first time you step onto a boat, your hands shake and your heart races. The feeling of being on water again, of that motion you remember too well, triggers immediate panic. But you breathe through it. You remind yourself that you're safe, that you have life jackets and emergency equipment, and experienced sailors who know what they're doing. You stay on the boat for an hour, then 2, then a full afternoon. Slowly, you reclaim your relationship with the ocean. You learn to appreciate its beauty without forgetting its danger. You understand that it's not malicious, it's simply indifferent, following its own patterns and rhythms regardless of human presence. You even return to fishing, though you're obsessive about safety now. Multiple life jackets, emergency beacon always activated, constant weather monitoring, never going out alone. Your friends joke about your paranoia, but you've earned the right to be cautious. 1 year after your ordeal, you return to the island. Not the exact island, you're not even sure you could find it again in the vast expanse of ocean, but a similar island. Small and remote, where you can confront the place that kept you alive, but also imprisoned you. You arrive by boat this time, with proper supplies and a radio and people who know exactly where you are. You walk the beach, explore the interior, and sit by the water thinking about the person you were when you washed ashore here, and the person you've become. That experience changed you fundamentally. You can't go back to being the person who got on that fishing boat for a casual birthday celebration. That person died in the storm, and someone else survived, someone harder, more capable, more aware of how fragile life really is. But you've also learned that survival isn't just about not dying. It's about finding meaning in the experience, using trauma as fuel for growth instead of letting it destroy you. It's about helping others so your suffering becomes service. You leave the island at sunset, watching it recede in the boat's wake. You don't need to go back again. You've made peace with what happened, integrated it into your life story instead of being defined by it. Epilogue. The gift of perspective. 2 years after your rescue, you're living a life that's both completely normal and fundamentally different from before. You have a job, relationships, hobbies, all the trappings of ordinary existence. But underneath the normalcy runs a current of awareness that most people don't have. You appreciate things differently now. Fresh water from a tap is a daily miracle. A full meal is a luxury you never take for granted. A warm bed, a solid roof, the presence of other people, all gifts that you once thought were basic entitlements of modern life.
You become a survival instructor, teaching maritime safety courses and sharing your experience with others. Not to dramatize what happened, but to prepare people for the reality that emergencies can strike anyone, that survival is possible if you know what to do, and that hope is worth maintaining, even in the darkest moments. You carry emergency equipment everywhere, a small kit in your car, your home, even a pocket-sized version when you travel.
Your friends think it's excessive, but you've learned that preparedness isn't paranoia, it's wisdom bought through suffering. The ocean remains a presence in your life. You live near it now, can see it from your window, can hear the waves at night. Some people can't understand why you'd want to be close to the thing that nearly killed you, but you need the reminder of what you survived, the proof that you're stronger than you once thought. You think about the dolphins sometimes. Wonder if they really did lead you to land, or if that was just coincidence interpreted through desperation. You'll never know for certain, but you've learned that some mysteries don't need solving, that meaning doesn't always require proof. You think about your friends who didn't survive. Carry their memory with you as both grief and motivation. They don't get to tell their stories, don't get second chances, don't get to appreciate sunsets and fresh water and the simple miracle of being alive. So you try to live fully enough for all of you to honor their loss by not wasting the survival that they didn't receive. The nightmares have mostly faded, though they return occasionally during storms or times of stress. You've learned to manage them, to recognize them as echoes of trauma rather than present danger. The panic attacks are less frequent. The hypervigilance has decreased to manageable levels. You're healing, slowly, the way all wounds heal if given time and proper care. You've written a book about your experience, not a dramatic adventure story, but an honest account of what survival really looks like. The fear, the mistakes, the moments of giving up, the small victories that kept you going. It's not a bestseller, but it reaches the people who need it, who find themselves in emergency situations and remember something you wrote that helps them survive. You receive letters from readers sometimes, people who used your techniques to survive their own ordeals, people who were inspired by your story to prepare better, to respect the ocean, to appreciate their lives. These letters mean more to you than any media attention or dramatic retelling ever could, because that's what you've learned most profoundly. Survival isn't just about the immediate crisis. It's what you do with the second chance, how you transform suffering into something meaningful, and how you help others so your pain becomes purpose. The ocean is still out there, vast and indifferent, claiming lives and giving them back in seemingly random patterns. You respect it now in ways you never did before. You understand that it's not an enemy to conquer or a resource to exploit, but a force of nature that operates by its own rules, indifferent to human hopes and fears. And somewhere out there, maybe, is another person on another raft or another island, fighting to survive, wondering if rescue will ever come. You hope someone finds them in time. You hope they have the strength to keep going through the darkest hours. You hope they survive to tell their story and help others in turn. Because that's the gift of survival. Not just staying alive, but becoming someone who makes other people's survival more likely. Not just enduring suffering, but transforming it into wisdom that can be shared. You stand at your window sometimes, watching the ocean, remembering those 37 days that felt like a lifetime. The terror and the beauty, the desperation and the determination, the loneliness and the strange peace that came from being stripped down to the essentials of existence. You wouldn't choose to go through it again, but you also wouldn't undo it, because it made you who you are now. Someone stronger, wiser, more grateful, more alive than you were before. The ocean taught you that survival isn't guaranteed, that life is fragile, that death is always possible. But it also taught you that humans are remarkably resilient, that hope is powerful,
that the will to live can carry you through situations that seem impossible. You survived 37 days lost at sea. And now you spend your days helping others prepare for their own survivals, whatever form they might take. That feels like enough. That feels like making meaning from chaos. That feels like honoring the miracle of your rescue by paying it forward in whatever ways you can. Sleep well, survivors. And remember, the ocean is beautiful and dangerous in equal measure. Respect it. Prepare for it. And if you find yourself lost on its surface, remember that survival is possible. Others have done it. You can too. Until next time, this is Sleepless Survivors, reminding you that every day above water is a gift, and every breath is a victory. Stay safe out there, and never, ever take solid ground for granted.